Grace Lee Whitney played Janice Rand on Star Trek for just 8 episodes. But their firing wasn't about ratings or budget cuts in 1966. Something happened behind closed doors at Desilu Studios that changed everything. A powerful executive called her for a late-night meeting. What occurred in that empty office was covered up for 30 years. Just days later, she was mysteriously fired from the biggest show on television. Their reason would shock fans and destroy lives. This isn't the Star Trek story, you know. Grace Lee Whitney entered Thorold just after midnight on April 1, 1930, in a small hospital in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Her birth was registered as Marianne Chase. Just 6 minutes into April Fool's Day, her biological mother signed away her rights and vanished without even looking at the baby. The father's name was left completely blank. There were no answers, only a silent space where a name should have been. Within weeks, the newborn was moved to Detroit as part of the state's foundling system. On June 19, 1930, a couple in Theramid adopted her privately and named her Grace Elaine Whitney, the woman who took her and celebrated with pink lemonade and a cake that said, "No fooling, she's ours." Grace later said that little joke made her laugh and cheat at the same time. The date of her birth always stayed with her. She would tell people, "I'm living proof that April Fool's jokes can last 85 years. Butin sighed. She believed she was a mistake. When Grace was 7, her world fell apart. It happened on a quiet Sunday while helping her mother in the kitchen. Her mother suddenly confessed that Grace was adopted. The word real hit her hard. She felt like the floor had opened, swallowed her whole. That night, she tore the lace off her favorite dress, angry that her whole life had been built in a lie. After that, things changed. She began sleepwalking. She hoarded milk cartons from school. She stopped having birthday parties because she said, "Guests always go home." Years later, she called her Star Trek hairstyle helmet hair that hides the abandoned kitten. She started drinking at 17 and said each drink was her way of trying to silence that little girl who felt thrown away. By the time she was 14, Grace had a job most adults would envy. In September 1944, she won a singing contest at Detroit's biggest station, WJR. She wore a borrowed dress and sang a jazz standard. The program director hired her right there and paid her $14 a week, which would be about $240 today. She sang so often, 22 shows a week, that factory workers listening in the early morning horseneck numbed her. Sunrise, Sally, a local department store even named a lipstick after her, and it sold out by Christmas. Her days were packed. She'd finished her shift, run to school, and then Rotterdam for rehearsals at night. She only slept a few hours, but she didn't complain at 15. She was paying her parents' mortgage and sending small donations to the orphanage she'd come from, trying to help the babies who hadn't yet been chosen. At 18, Grace was ready for more. She left Detroit with just $37 and a cardboard hatbox. She dropped Elaine from her name and became Lee Whitney, hoping to avoid being seen as just another pretty face. She sang at Chicago's Blue Note Club and shared the stage with Billie Holiday, who had been banned from performing in New York because of a drug conviction. Holiday earned $1,000 a week. Grace made $55. She lived in a cheap boarding house and ate hot dogs for dinner, but she studied Holiday's songs until she had the whole set list memorized in just 2 days. She also learned how to hit the right notes after a few bourbons, a skill that would later become a crutch. Her hard work paid off. Soon she was on tour with Spike Jones, playing 157 shows in 46 states in 1 year. Every stop came with a shot of rye whiskey and a new lesson in survival. Then she toured with Fred Waring and his choir, performing in 200 cities and covering 25,000 miles in 9. Waring was strict but charming. He drank sherry after shows and insisted on proper manners. Grace tried to follow the rules, but the constant travel and alcohol blurred everything. One night she'd be singing in a tuxedoed choir. The next, she was drinking backstage just to calm her nerves. Along the way, she learned tricks for staying safe. Spike Jones taught her to laugh before Sumi Niels did. Fred Waring shielded her from pushy men by placing his napkin gently over her hand. But there were outwacers in one city. Musicians play set bets on how long it would take for the new girl singer to give in to a kiss. Grace figured out how to trade smiles for protection and stayed alert in every dressing room. In 1952, she surprised everyone by enrolling in nursing school. She delivered babies, assisted in surgeries, and wore the uniform proudly. But when Spike Jones called about a new television show, she had a choice. Tomac nurses made $180 a month. The show paid $250 a week, plus travel. Cher turned to entertainment, leaving behind her starched uniform with a note that said, "Showbiz 1, bloodless but loud." She kept smelling salts and gaza in her purse for the rest of her life. Just in case, Grace Lee Whitney started her journey on a high note. In 1951, she made her Broadway debut as Miss Hallinan Top Banana. The show opened on November 1st at the Winter Garden Theater and ran for 3 performances for closing in October 1952. It was written as a star vehicle for Phil Silvers, who later won a Tony for his. Whitney performed alongside elogians like Rose Marie and Jack Albertson. Before this, she had been a nightclub singer, opening for Billie Holiday and Buddy Rich. Now she had earned her place in the entertainment mention, a step that helped launch her Hollywood career. In 1954, when United Artists adapted Top Banana into a movie, Whitney kept her role. The film had a $150,000 budget and was directed by Alfred E. Green. Although it was shot in 3D, the studio released it in standard format. The movie kept nearly all of the original cast from Broadway, this marked Whitney's first credited film role and her official entrance into Hollywood. But things didn't move quickly after that. Whitney took on several uncredited roles in famous films. In House of Wax, 1953, she was cast as a background beauty during the height of 3D mania. Her biggest uncredited appearance was in Some Like It Hot, 1959, where she played Rosella, a band member who shared scenes with Marilyn Monroe, Jack Lemmon, and Tony. She also appeared uncredited in The Naked and the Dead, 1958, and Pocketful of Miracles, 1961. Despite her screen time and dialogue, she often didn't get credit. This was common in the studio era, especially for women seen as just visual extras. Whitney later called herself glamorous wallpaper, and she wasn't exaggerating. Hollywood in the 1950s often reduced women like her to background decoration. Her filmography was full of uncredited roles that looked good on screen, but did little to move her career forward. She was in The Texan Meets Calamity Jane, 1950, House of Wax, 1953, Tulpa Banana, 1954, The Naked and the Dead, 1958, and Pocketful of Miracles, 1961. Still, she kept working. She appeared in over 80 live television shows during this time. These included You Bet Your Life with Groucho Marx, The Red Skeleton Show, The Jimmy Durante Show, and The Ernie Cavach Show from 1957 to 1958. She also appeared regularly on Queen for a Day in a visual assist. She was always seen, but rarely heard. In the late 1950s and early 1960s, she became a staple on television. Her first dramatic role was on Cowboy GMN in 1953. She made over 100 appearances on major shows, including The Real McCoys, Wagon Train, The Rifleman, Bat Masterson 77 Sunset Strip, Bewitched, Batman, and The Untouchables. She wasn't just doing small parts. She played real characters. On Mike Hammer in 1958, she played Tempest Flame. On Hawaiian Eye, she played Marcia Vale. Her appearance with Groucho Marx in 1953 showed she could keep up with quick wit and sharp humor. Her big break came in early 1966. When Gene Roddenberry was casting for a new science fiction show. Whitney had worked with him before on a pilot for Polycystry, and that helped her land on audition for Star Trek. Roddenberry wanted someone who looked strong, who also carried a soft edge. He needed Somione, professional, yet emotional, fit the bill. She hadn't trained as a nurse, had experience perfing live, and had worked with music legends like Billie Holiday and Fred Waring. She was cast as Janice Rand, the captain's assistant aboard the USS Enterprise. Her contract was supposed to last for 13 episodes, but she only appeared in 8 before being released. She played major roles in episodes like Charlie X, Mary and Enemy Within. In Charlie X, her character was the object of obsession for a young man with superpowers. In The Enemy Within, she had to resist an evil version of Captain Kirk. Her final episode aired not long after the show premiered in September 1966. NBC had invested $190,000 per episode, making Star Trek the most expensive series on television at that time. Still, the network let Whitney go. Roddenberry had envisioned her character as more than just a pretty assistant. She was meant to show the balance between professionalism and human emotion. The unspoken attraction between her and Kirk was written into the character from the beginning, but NBC executives didn't like it. They thought it made Kirk seem too unavailable for romantic plots with guest stars. They believed that to attract female viewers, Kirk had to look single and open. That decision led to Whitney's exit from the show, even though she was already a poet. Meanwhile, there was something dark happening behind the scenes. Grace Lee Whitney, just 2 months into filming Star Trek in late 1966, got an invitation from a senior executive at Desilu Productions. She didn't question it. She had worked with Gene Roddenberry on a pilot called Police Story, and this seemed like a wreck. The meeting was set for late evening in an empty office building. It felt odd, but not suspicious. The man had power. In that era, studio executives controlled everything, and actors knew better than to push back. The moment she arrived, something felt off. He offered her a drink, then started talking in a casual, overly smooth way. She would later call it glib talk. It wasn't small talk. It was part of a routine. The time, the place, even the way he spoke. It had all been planned. This wasn't a work meeting, it was a trap. one designed to isolate and waken her. She soon realized the situation wasn't just inappropriate, it was dangerous. The power games of Hollywood weren't just about contracts and casting, they could turn violent. When she began to resist, things escalated. She wasn't just harassed, she was attacked. In her 1998 memoir, The Longest Trek, Whitney described how that night turned into a violent assault that nearly killed her. She was trapped in an office on the Desilu lot. She tried to push him away, but he got more aggressive. She was terrified. She stopped resisting, not because she agreed but because she feared for her life. What had started as a career opportunity ended in trauma, right in Thievery Place, where she thought she was building her future. That same night, she confided in Leonard Nimoy. He did not just listen, he became her lifeline. Nimoy didn't treat it as gossip, has stayed by her side for years. When Whitney was later fired from Star Trek, her life unraveled. She struggled with addiction. She became homeless. And Nimoy stayed close. He encouraged her to join Alcoholics Anonymous. He talked to her about faith. He helped her get back up. She would later say that without him, she might not have survived. Their bond went beyond the show. It was rooted in something deeply painful and deeply human. They never named the man who did that. Not once. Whitney always said, "This is my story, not his." Even in her book, she left out his name. Nimoy kept the too. That silence lasted their whole lives. It wasn't because they didn't care. It was because they were afraid of what would happen if they spoke. The man had power. Talking could mean lawsuits, blacklisting, and worse. It was the kind of silence that protected the wrong person and destroyed one who had been hurt. Just days after the assault, her agent got the law. On September 8, 1966, the same day Star Trek aired its first episode, Whitney was fired. She wasn't just losing a job, she was losing the biggest break of her life. She had filmed its several episodes already and was scheduled to appear in more. She'd even been kept on set for extra days. Her contract. Then suddenly she was gone. No explanation, no warning, no warning.